My name is Gina Bell. I'm a storyteller, and this is Jars of Arioch. We'll start with the foreword. Now, the story you are about to read is fiction. The foreword, on the other hand, is not. The foreword is 100% true, and I know because it happened to me. In the fall of 1998, my second daughter was born. I wasn't trying to get pregnant. I'd been on birth control for years. So when I found out I was 3 months pregnant, I was shocked and extremely excited about her upcoming arrival. My first daughter had been born premature, and we had a lot of problems. And she survived and had no long-lasting issues, but I had decided not to have any more children. As often happens, Mother Nature had different plans for me. And so the moment I saw the positive home pregnancy test, I was in love. And she was born on time and healthy. She was perfect. It was November and cold. We went out with her to see the last showing of a popular movie, hoping she would sleep through it. As I recall, the movie was Shakespeare in Love. I nursed her throughout the film, and she was quiet as a mouse. So that you might understand my encounter, I will describe the movie theater. It was the Brendan Theater in Concord, California. You enter with a concession stand in the center of the lobby. It shows a lot of different films at once, and all the movie screens are down a long ramp behind the concession stand. It's like a long tunnel. Now, my point in telling you this is that once you enter the tunnel, you cannot see peripherally until you walk back out through it. Now, the movie finished, and we walked back through the tunnel. I was there with my husband and mother-in-law. It was brisk outside and dark. The theater was closed, and the only light was coming from the concession stand in the middle. My husband went to get the car and left me, my mother-in-law, and our newborn inside. We walked to a corner where we could see him when he drove back up. I cradled my sleeping baby with my back against a full-length glass window. I was facing the tunnel, but far enough away where no one coming out of the tunnel could have seen me standing there without first walking out of it. A man in a hat came through the tunnel and walked directly at me. I have no idea how he even saw me standing there in the dark. It was like he had known exactly where I was. There was no pause. He walked with his hands clenched in tight fists. He walked like he was power walking. He had on a long leather trench coat. His hat was made from the same material and had a brim. He wore boots that pounded quickly as he walked towards me. He got into my face, maybe 2 inches from my nose, and stopped abruptly. He took his hand and gently stroked my baby's head while cupping it with his hand. He stared me right in the eyes and whispered, "She's beautiful," very slowly. He never looked at her. Now, I was completely frozen with fear, and all the hair on my body stood up. I heard a honk from my husband outside, and the man in the hat turned on his heels and marched away in the same pounding fashion he had walked towards me. I was shaking as we walked outside. I strapped my baby into her car seat, and my mother-in-law asked me if I knew him. I answered, "I have no idea what that was." And my husband, being the protective alpha male that he is, immediately wanted to know what we were talking about. I told him what had just happened. He asked me what he looked like, and all I could remember was that he was white and had crystal blue eyes. I explained that he wouldn't be hard to find since he was wearing what looked more like a costume than normal everyday clothing. We drove around the area for a few minutes, but we couldn't find him. Now that night I went home and called my younger sister to tell her about the man that had scared me so much. As I began my story, she immediately asked me if he was wearing a hat. Shocked, I answered, "Yes." And she responded back that we shouldn't talk about him. Now I'm an intelligent woman, and though I'm open-minded, I'm not one to believe in the supernatural. I'm not even religious. And my sister began by telling me her man-in-the-hat story. And she was living with 2 roommates, and the 2 girls had left to go on vacation. They told my sister to leave lights on while they were gone, that the house could get creepy at night. It was an older home. I had been there once. It had wooden walls. Beautiful, really. She said she would wake up in the middle of the night and she could hear distant conversations like a radio talk show on somewhere. She had gotten up to try and find the source, but was never able to. Well, this one night, she went back to bed and woke up with a man lying on her back. She tilted her head to look at him, but all she could make out was the brim of the hat. He had wrapped his hands under hers and was digging his nails into her palm. A moment later, he was gone. She got up quickly and could still see and feel the nail marks on her palms. She left that night and moved in with a boyfriend. Now, the boyfriend lived in a large apartment building. The next 2 weeks were quiet for her, but there were 3 deaths that happened at that one apartment complex in that short span of time: a suicide and 2 overdoses. After being there for 2 weeks, she was once again woken in the middle of the night by something. She said she opened her eyes and the man in the hat was sitting in a chair watching her. When he saw her open her eyes, he pointed at her and said, "Aha, I found you." She screamed and her boyfriend flew out of bed and put the lights on. She was screaming and pointing at an empty chair. Now, I also have a cousin who told me that she used to see a man walking past her bedroom window at night with a hat on. Now, she grew up in the middle of Yosemite. They lived in a cabin buried in the mountains. I've seen men standing with long coats and a hat here and there. It might be coincidence, but it seems that each time I see him, something bad will happen. It's always something I cannot do anything about. I dreamed of him one morning. This would be the one and only time I have ever dreamt of him. I woke up to dozens of missed calls from my younger sister. At the exact moment I was dreaming about a man with a hat, my sister was being robbed at gunpoint by 3 men in a Vans shoe store in Van Nuys, California. They had grabbed her the second she walked in. They grabbed her so violently that her purse slid under a shoe rack. They dragged her by her hair to a back room. They threw her on top of several other bodies. He put a gun to her head and told her to close her eyes. She closed her eyes and then everything went quiet. Slowly, she began feeling movement from the people underneath her. They were all alive and physically unharmed. Is it a coincidence? I had one more coincidence. We moved to Gatlinburg, Tennessee in 2009. We bought a little pizza place and raised our children there. One evening, I told my crew the story of my man in the hat while we were cleaning up. Daryl, one of my employees, gets a call from a friend of his that works downtown. Now, Gatlinburg is a tourist destination filled with all sorts of restaurants and shops. The guy told him there was a man downtown that was robbing people with a knife. The man was wearing a brimmed hat and a long leather trench coat. Coincidence? Now, there are parts of me that are hesitant to write about him. I know this is silly. I mentioned my concern to my very logical husband, and his response was, "Good thing Stephen King never had those fears." I know he's right. So I will begin my fictional tale of the man wearing a hat. Now, there's a thing I have read about online. They call him the Hat Man. People see him while they're experiencing sleep paralysis. I was not asleep. I was in a public place. I had another person with me. The Hat Man is described as featureless, or having the features of a Cheshire cat from Alice in Wonderland. The man that walked up to me had a normal face. I just couldn't remember anything other than his eyes and his skin color. He was a younger man of maybe 30, but I can't describe his face. Now, he got into the face of a grown woman holding her newborn in the dark with an old woman standing beside her. Why was I so terrified? Is it all just a big coincidence? I was so scared I couldn't even speak. The story you are about to read is not a story about the Hat Man. Is it dangerous to talk about him? Is it dangerous to read about him? Is it dangerous to hear about him? I guess we'll find out.